systems engineering is kind of the tie that binds all of us to this new world of skilling. Now, systems thinking means that we have to start looking end to end. We have to take off our blinders and we have to step a little bit away from our areas of expertise and be curious about broadening our knowledge in other areas. Test-driven development is a great example of that, right? Where we want developers to be specialists in code, right? We want you to produce the best code possible, but we also want you to be able to build that code with testing in mind, right? That is a multi-dimensional professional. Have you ever seen this, the T-shaped individual? Have you seen that before or heard about it, right? You are now inspired to become T-shaped, right? You, your teams, those that report to you, those that work with you, you want to work with T-shaped people. Now, the T is really interesting because the stem of the T is your depth of knowledge, your area of specialty. The crown of the T is breadth of knowledge, which means you don't have to become a quality assurance engineer in order to be a test-driven developer, right? You have to have just enough knowledge about a bunch of different competencies so that you are multidimensional. And you'll know where the threshold is where you need to seek a different level of expertise. But the good news here is it's a great day to be in IT. Really, it is the best day to be in IT. Right? I do a lot of speaking of women in technology, and that's my message. Right? Never before have you been encouraged to acquire new skills, to be curious, to collaborate, interact with others who have different skills than you do. You know, in IT, we are an organization of specialists. And we grew up like a tree with so many different branches that this branch doesn't see, know, or talk to that branch and doesn't recognize the vocabulary, the language, the tools, or anything associated with it. You are now inspired to go seek that knowledge. Right? There's a lot of different ways to seek it. We'll talk a little bit about that. But today, you are now inspired to do that. And I would encourage you to search in your soul to figure out why you got into technology in the first place, right? Something inspired you to enter the technology field. I said in my introduction, I'm an accidental technologist. I ended up in technology really purely by accident. I happened to work for a firm that had a lot of forethought in the early 80s about what they were going to do with technology, right? Each of you chose this field, or the field chose you. Right, one or the other. But I would really encourage you to remember what it felt like when you first became a technologist, because that's what you're being encouraged to do today. To expand your horizons, to learn new skills, right? I'm not a coder, and I will never be. You have no challenge from me. I will never be a threat to you, right? But right now, everyone in operations has to learn some level of coding, right? Site reliability engineers are encouraged to be Python coders. Right? So everybody has to become cross-functional. We don't even talk about teams anymore. We talk about squads. Has anybody ever seen the Spotify squad model? Right? It's fascinating, right? It's really fascinating. Think about the difference between a team and a squad. And which one do you want to be on? Right? They not only built squads, they built tribes. Right? So they actually took squads of squads and really created a different model. And maybe that works for you and maybe it doesn't, right? But it is a motivation to say, let's think differently, let's learn differently, and let's expand our personal and our professional and our organizational horizons, right? Someday you may go from T to Pi or Pi. Today's Pi Day, isn't it? Right? So you'll go from T to Pi on Pi Day. And you'll go from Pi to comb, and maybe you'll develop additional specialties, or maybe you won't, and that's okay. But keep expanding your breadth of knowledge in order to be able to contribute actively to your squad. And if tomorrow you go back to your team and you're in a position of empowerment, and you now say to your team, we are now a squad, you've first taken the first step to change the way people think. All right? Sometimes it's very, very simple steps that you can take to modernize the skill. The other thing I want to share is a lot of organizations are starting skills modernization programs. Sounds very formal, doesn't it? Has Is anybody's organization starting skills modernization programs? Right? That's an intentional effort to improve your skills, which means there's funding behind it, resources behind it. You are encouraged. There's hackathons. There's internal DevOps days. There's certainly training and certification that goes with that. There's workshops. There's enablements, right? Skills modernization, skilling, is top of mind as part of the cultural transformation, because culture doesn't transform, people do. And so part of this skills modernization, and I want you to think about that if you ruled the universe, what skill would you acquire? You don't rule the universe. I tell my team this all the time. We play this game called If I Ruled the Universe, right? So if you ruled the universe, what skill would you be curious about, right? If you're a developer, maybe or maybe not, you want to learn more about infrastructure or testing. If you're an infrastructure person, maybe you want to learn more about agile software development, right? Talk to your team, talk to your leaders, talk to each other, and start that process of reskilling. There's a horrible, horrible, horrible statistic that says 70% of today's IT professional will not be able to make it through the transformation. Scary number, isn't it? It's a very, very scary number, right? My generation will start to retire out, so you can include us out of that, right? 70% won't make it through the transformation. We're going to do a lot to change that, and DevOps Institute is going to stand behind that, right? DevOn's going to stand behind that. You don't want to be one of that 70%, and I'm really hoping that's a really, really wrong number. But statistically, there's been a lot of analytics in terms of what organizations are doing. They say the word DevOps, they say the word transformation, but they're not really taking the right steps to do that. And you know, Jez mentioned it before. You're going to see that in a lot of presentations, DevOps starts with people. All right, and that's not soft, fluffy people. That's real people doing real things. So as I said before, breadth of knowledge is as important as depth of knowledge. So in addition to being able to develop knowledge about testing, for example, everybody, by the way, needs to understand testing, right? You all need to be test engineers, and if you're an infrastructure person, developer, doesn't matter. How many of you are developers? Okay, large portion. How many of you would identify on the operational side? A little bit less, right? How many of you don't know? Right, you kind of fall in between the two, right? How many of you have a mixed role? Anybody have a mixed role? Okay, not uncommon, right? So you're already in a T if you have a mixed role, because you're doing some of the work on both sides of that aisle, and that's important as well. The other thing that you need to understand is, in addition to grooming your technical skills, you need to groom your business skills. That has been identified as a very, very critical success factor. You have to understand why your business is in business in the first place. What is your business's core values? What are its outcomes? What are its strategies? What are its objectives? And not only the leaders need to know that. You, in whatever role you're in, you need to understand that, because you're a contributor to that. You may be heading off in completely the wrong direction or focusing on the wrong priority because you're not aware of the strategies of your business. And remember, every business is a technical business. You know, you look at some of the businesses like Amazon. Amazon's now taking on food and farm, right? So Amazon's getting into the medical business, the pharmacy business. They were a bookseller. Right? They were a bookseller. If you're a technologist at Amazon, you need to be thinking about the cycle of food, so that it's not like a book that can sit on the shelf for a couple of years before it gets sold. There is a cycle where food's going to go bad, right? You need to understand the requirements, the regulations regarding pharmaceuticals. Right? It's a whole new business strategy. And their IT teams need to understand that pivot as well. Right? The leader has the strategy, everyone needs to follow it. You do need to understand principles, processes, and practices. I mentioned change management, and everybody kind of groans when we hear change management. And by the way, that's my fault. I would say very honestly, that's my fault. I've been teaching ITIL for 15 years, and we taught you command and control. Right? And you should put a request for change in 2 weeks in advance. It should go to your change advisory board. Change advisory board should review it. You should fill out a 25-page form, and then maybe, just maybe, we'll let you put it in production. And suddenly now we've switched and said, oh, by the way, release several times a day. So again, there's a lot of good ways to do change management in a much more agile way. I'm happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk about that. But the reality is you have to understand the core processes before you can make them more agile. So you need to understand why we have change management in the first place, other than it's a pain in your bum. All right, so understanding some of that. Certainly technology and automation, as you all know in the DevOps space, we have no shortage of tools, right? You can pick, ZBA Labs produced the periodic table of tools. It's an eye chart that will make your head explode. You may be using a lot of those tools, that's great. You don't need to know all of the tools, but you do need to know what the categories of tools are and what their capabilities are. Right? You do need to understand testing tools, configuration tools, release automation tools, right? You need to understand repositories, at least understand what they are and what the key players in the space is. Everybody's now learning about Kubernetes and Docker, right? So you do need to have some core understanding of a lot of these concepts, if not just to be able to speak to your colleagues at some level of information, right? You don't have to be an expert if it's not your core competency or it's not your core specialty. But again, be curious about that. You hear the term Kubernetes, you don't know what it is, Google it, right? Go listen to a presentation about Kubernetes, attend an event like this, be curious. And then cultural considerations, I'm going to talk to you about in just a minute. You know, we talk about culture as if it's surgical. Like I can take your current culture, I can put you under anesthesia, I can remove your culture, surgically inject a new culture, and you'll wake up tomorrow and everything will be different. And that's not true, right? That's not true. It's not a surgical attempt. People transform. And the way people transform is they understand the difference between communication and collaboration, right? In communication, I tell you something, and you tell me something, right? So we talk to each other. Anybody know what the difference is in collaboration? What's the difference with collaboration? No brave souls? I'm going to ask you your opinion. I'm going to say, what do you think about this? So I'm not going to tell you, and you're not going to tell me. I'm actually going to ask that question. What do you think? What's your opinion? What's your insight? What's your idea on this? All right, that's collaboration. And that's a skill. Right? We're not necessarily born good communicators. In fact, it's one of humanity's worst skills. We don't communicate well. We think we do. We really don't. I have a friend that says, if you think you've communicated well, double your efforts. Right? Because we really don't talk to each other really well. So business strategies, process, real high level of automation if that's not your area of expertise, and then understanding culture. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in depth. So I've given you, hopefully, just a high-level overview of what you should be thinking, how you should start processing your skills modernization. Jez mentioned this, and I'll encourage you as well. Look at your value stream, right? Look at your value stream. Hopefully, you've started down the value stream mapping exercise, and you're able to identify at least what are the stages of your value stream. But inside your value stream is people, process, and automation. So understand what are the people aspects, what are the process, other loyalties aspects, and certainly what are the automations accesses. Groom your cultural skill. I said this before. In order for humans to transform, we have to be able to understand human dynamics. Jez mentioned Westrum. Westrum really talks about the flow of information from pathological through generative. And I would encourage you to read the Westrum report or look at other presentations that talk about that. Look at transformational leadership. It's been identified as one of the most critical success factors. Transformational leaders are a little bit different than servant leaders. Servant leaders protect the team, right? If you're a Scrum Master, we remove impediments and we protect the team. Transformational leaders are inspirational. They inspire the team to move towards a common goal, right? They motivate the team towards the what's in it for me, right? And I've given you some links in here, and I know that this will be available to you. Look at the Spotify squad model. See if it makes sense for your organization, even baby steps, right? I said if tomorrow you call your team a squad, you're in pretty good shape, right? You're in a situation where maybe the team starts to think differently. Jason Cox of Disney likes to say the first thing he did with his team is he renamed them. He does a shared services team, called them all systems engineers, right? They supported like 30 business units, called them all systems engineers. They started to think like systems engineers, and the perception of the team changed as well. All right, so again, you can't change culture, but you can change behavior. So research some of these practices that are emerging. Groom your cultural skills. It is probably the hardest skill for you to be able to groom because we can't automate it, right? And that's our go-to position in IT. Optimize some of the best practices. The great news about DevOps that may be very frustrating to you is we don't have a single body of knowledge. And I know some of you wish you could go to 5 books and say, start here and continue the journey here, and here's step 1, step 2, step 3. And I know that's a little bit frustrating, but DevOps is inspiring dialogue, conversation, and inspiring you to research. So optimize the best practices of ITIL, of Agile, of Lean, right? Value stream mapping comes out of the Lean space. Read books like The Phoenix Project. Anybody read The Phoenix Project? Right, you all know who Jayne is. Right, follow on to that is the DevOps Handbook. They just released an audio series called Beyond the Phoenix Project. I think they're running some special on Audible or through IT Revolution. But listen to the message behind, the fable behind the Phoenix Project. It isn't just a fun novel to read. There is really a message behind the message. Jez's continuous delivery book, right? Releases should be boring. It's a great mantra. Well, if the releases are going to be boring, how are we going to do that? Become familiar with the automation. As I said before, there's no shortage of automation out there, right? But be curious, right? Look at the emerging trends. A year ago, we didn't say the word Kubernetes as much as we say it now. A year ago, we talked a lot more about Docker, right? Now we talk about Docker and Kubernetes, right? Instead of just talking about Linux, we're now talking about Microsoft environments, and we've expanded that. And there are new tools coming out every day, as I said. But become familiar with the most common ones, right? And not just Puppet and Chef, those are great tools, but start to look at the repository, start to look at the release automation tools. There's some really cool tools out there as well. So really just to kind of wrap up, I've kind of summed up some of the skills, at least at a very, very high level, that every one of you, regardless of your role, and every member of your team has to have at least some experience with. Right? So value stream mapping, you want to get your team together and start talking, start building a value stream map, right? Let them debate, let them, get, as Jez said, it's hard to get them all in a room, but let them talk about what is the value stream, what are the activities, and then let them talk about which ones add value and which ones are waste, right? You might have to be a little bit of a moderator on that, but there's some really great education, there's some really great consultation about doing value stream mapping. Agile software development. Who said they were operations? Raise your hand. Okay, are you familiar with Agile? I hope so, because there's a lot of operations folks that really don't know what Scrum is. They've never read the Scrum Guide. They haven't taken a Scrum course. And that, I think, is a real tie that binds, right? Being able to understand that it's not just about sprints, I think is really important. I mentioned test engineering. You all need to become testers. Right, regardless of your role. Infrastructure is code, security is code, everything is code, platform is a service. Testing, it has to be pervasive, it has to be continuous. Truthfully, it has to be automated. Security, DevSecOps. How many of you are hearing about DevSecOps? Right? Really hot topic right now. DevOps Institute is introducing a DevSecOps engineer course coming up later this quarter for just that reason. The practices are starting to become clearer in terms of what is DevSecOps. A year ago, we used the term rugged. Now we use the DevSecOps has really emerged. DevSecOps days are emerging. RSA conferences are all over the place. So security is now getting engaged. You need a high-level understanding of security. Breadth of knowledge, not necessarily depth of knowledge. Containerization and microservices. If you're not familiar with containers, you don't understand what a microservice is, right? You can say the word Kubernetes, but you don't know what it actually is, then you need to become curious and learn more about it, because that is very, very pervasive. And everyone on IT at least needs to understand what a container and a microservice is, because the monolithic applications have to go away at some point. Maybe not all of them, but most of them too. Data analytics, right? We have so much data, we don't have a lot of information, right? So how do we analyze that data into business strategies, and how do we take that forward? The term big data was coined for a really good reason, because it's really big. So if we understand at least how to analyze it and what the message behind the message is, that's important as well. Key ITSM processes: incident problem change, service level management, configuration management, and in the spotlight today, release management. Really understanding release management as a process, not just as automation, very, very critical. And then I mentioned before, I would encourage you to be curious about site reliability engineering. It is very, very emerging. It is still in its early stages, but we're starting to see organizations that are actively adopting it. Learn continuously, right? Be curious. I said before, and it's a really great way for us to wrap up. It is a great day to be in IT. You are now required to be disruptive. I mean, how cool is that, right? How cool is that when you go to work, they're actually telling you to think differently, as opposed to the same way we did last year, the year before, or whatever. The organizations that are the most successful are the ones that have come up with something completely unexpected. So be the unexpected evangelist, right? But it starts with each of you individually. Read the case studies, go to conferences like this, go to YouTube, go to training, get certified, groom your skills. And then if you do want to learn more, right, there are opportunities for you, right? I'm not going to plug, we don't train, we don't do any training, we're an association, but the message here is that there is now clarity in a lot of these topic areas. So if you are curious, then seek out training. And if the training is internal, that's okay. If the training is certification, that's great if it gives value to you. But if the training comes through facilitation, through value stream mapping, or through other ways, absolutely encourage you to just keep growing your skills. So with that, I would also encourage you to join our free learning community. We have a lot of content. We have a lot sitting behind it. Follow us. I think, there's just lots of great opportunities to do that. So thank you for the opportunity. I know we're all waiting for lunch, so I won't keep you much longer. But Bess, do you want to see if we have any questions? Bring me my robot. I love that robot. Isn't that it's cool.
Coming up, coming up, coming up.
Don't rush, don't rush. Well, they're hungry.
Big round of applause for Jayne.
I'm going to name him.
Okay. Who has the first question for Jayne?
When's lunch?
Short question up here.
Why is learning ITIL still relevant? ITIL.
Sorry, say it one more time.
Why is it still relevant to learn about ITIL? I don't know how you pronounce it.
So I come from the ITIL space, and I would tell you very quickly that when DevOps first started to emerge at the enterprise, there was a ITIL is dead, long live ITIL. And the problem with ITIL is, truthfully, ITIL was written for waterfall. It was written, last time it was updated was 2007 with a refresh in 2011. Now they're working on a new version of it, but the core message is still good, right? It was never meant to exclude agile software development or whatever, but again, at the time, waterfall was the most common. There is still a lot of debate between the DevOps community and the ITIL community, but I think they're starting to come closer together. There's some challenges in the IT service management space to ITIL, but at the end of the day, you still need to control change. It's just how you do it is differently. And if anybody wants, I've authored the Agile Service Management Guide, which is not about specific process, but it's about an approach to process design. If you send me an email, I'll give you all my cards. We'll give you the link to be able to download it for free. We can download it from the DevOps Institute website as well. So are you saying that you don't think ITIL is still relevant, or are you finding debate there?
I was amazed you named ITIL, because I would think it's not very important anymore to people, but so I was just amazed.
Well, and again, I think you're right, that in many organizations it's not as important as it was because the world has changed and ITIL is seen as very slow, right? It seems very bureaucratic, very slow, very command and control. And again, the processes are good. I don't know that we need 26 processes, but the general process is incident, problem, change, configuration, release, all still very healthy processes, and the guidance is good. It just needs to be modernized. So that's part of a skilling exercise as well, is to be able to modernize. We use the term minimum viable process, right? So you know minimum viable product. Let's use minimum viable process to figure out how much is just enough. And that's what you need your organization to start thinking about.
Thank you very much. Who has a question?
We're hungry.
Are you hungry? Are you hungry, guys? Yeah, okay. Another warm round of applause for Jayne. Thank you very much. So what's next?